maybe. I mean, if you want, I can just sort of give my thoughts and we can talk about them if we
Yeah,
think
sure. I
that's
mean, is
like
that
a
what you want, Matthew?
Yeah, I mean that sounds like a good idea. Yeah, I wasn't planning
yeah,
on like moderating really.
okay. Yeah. So I mean I guess I think so I mean you Ethan have spent a lot more time studying this and like thinking about it whatever than I have or really probably ever will. Um, so I'm sure that there will be places where you have some point, and I just sort of have to shrug and say, uh, yeah, I don't know, I need to look into that. But I guess, yeah, I mean, I guess part of what I want to convey is why I'm not that worried if it turns out that that's the case. Um, at a high level, I mean, my guess would be that uh, what happened is that Sia, I don't think that she was being openly fraudulent. Um, I also don't think that she was like seeing the Virgin Mary with her physical eyes. I think there was probably some other sense in which she was having vision that in some way or other was produced by her. And then I think she got the other kids to go along with it. Um, and I think that there are a lot of pieces of evidence that fit with that pretty well. Um, the fact that, well, I mean, we'll want to talk about stuff, but the fact that there are a lot of predictions involved that are either turn out to be wrong or are only revealed after the fact for unclear reasons. The fact that in many cases the preoccupations of the Virgin Mary seem a little weird, but they seem more like things that maybe Lucia would have generated in her own mind. Um, the fact that things get added to the story over time in ways that feel kind of weird. Um, so I think probably in some sense or other, Lucia was the source, and then she kind of added to it and embellished over time, and she got her little cousins to go along with it. Um, to give an analogy that may or may not be that close, but like if you think about the witnesses to the Book of Mormon, um, okay, you have these signed statements from like a dozen adults or whatever, or some of them are not signatories of the main statements, but you have like a dozen or more adults who certainly say things that suggest that they saw the angel Moroni in the Book of Mormon with their physical eyes. Um, None of them ever went back on that, uh, even when they had fallings out with Joseph Smith. Uh, what was going on with that? Uh, well, we have this statement from Martin Harris from many years later where he's like, okay, actually, we never saw them with our physical eyes. We saw them with our spiritual eyes. Uh, and, as far as I can tell, your spiritual eyes are just your imagination. Um, and it seems like Joseph Smith imagined things and got other people to imagine them, and then they described these as experiences of the angel Moroni, as etc. In terms that if you don't know uh, that they have this doctrine about spiritual eyes, which maybe we wouldn't, except for like one or two statements made by witnesses years later. This would seem like a very ad hoc and implausible theory. They got confused about whether they saw things with their spiritual eyes. Like, come on. Um, I think it was probably something like that. Lucia somehow thought that she was having visionary experiences and somehow got the little cousins to like, just like Joseph Smith could do it, got them to, oh, don't you see the Virgin Mary? Um, and my guess is it was something like that. And then later on, she added on elements. I think the stuff about I think all this stuff about the secrets and the contents of the secrets and Russia and whatever, I don't think there was anything about that in 1917. I think that was added later. And then, the big argument against that view is like, well, she said that something was going to happen on October 13th, and then something really crazy did happen. And that's impressive. Now, she did also say something else was going to happen on October 13th, the end of the war, and that didn't happen. And Ethan, I know, has a story about that, and we'll want to talk about that. It's also weird that the thing that happened was, it wasn't really any obvious connection to the Virgin Mary, or any, it wasn't a vision of the Virgin. It wasn't a voice from heaven. It wasn't even the sun turning blue, because then you'd think, oh, that's the color of the Virgin Mary. So it's like a little weird that Mary decides to vindicate her with this kind of odd, random sun miracle. But my guess there is that, reading, I was convinced of this partly by Scott Alexander's post. It seems like it's probably just the case that sometimes when people look at the sun for a long time under the right weather conditions, they start to see things that are very sun miracle-like. And that's my guess, is that that's probably what happened. And there's some amount of improbability and like, okay, well, so the weather conditions were right. Lucia did get everybody to look at the right time, etc. But at the same time, there's also some selection effect where, there have been lots of prophets and visionaries who made predictions and they didn't come out to be true. And, we're only talking about this one because something did happen. And, I think when you look at like, well, the fact that people in r/sun gazer can achieve this, or the fact that there are similar phenomena in like clearly heretical Marian apparitions, so this sort of suggests that it's probably more likely to be some natural phenomenon. At the same time, it's weird that Mary would choose to vindicate herself with this sort of irrelevant natural phenomenon, the irrelevant sun dancing around thing that matches natural phenomena, at least pretty closely. And so that's roughly my guess about what happened. Lucia had some kind of visionary mindset. Somehow or other, she was the source of the visions. She, to some extent was impressive, but to some extent it was a self-fulfilling prophecy, because her making the prophecy was why everybody was looking at the sun at that time. And there are kind of independent reasons to think, yeah, sometimes this just happens when everybody looks at the sun under the right circumstances. I also think, because to me there's evidence of embellishment, adding things, adding weird elements, etc. I think there are like reasonably. I think there's a pretty good question about whether even if Lucia was being appeared to by the Virgin Mary, there's a question about how much we can actually trust her reports about what was said. And insofar as this is supposed to be an argument for Catholicism specifically, opposed to an argument for just a high view of Mary or something, we really do need to be able to trust the specifics of what she said, because the stuff about dedicating it to the Immaculate Heart, et cetera, that needs to be in there. And I don't think that was in there. So even if it turned out that this was some sort of supernatural event, some sort of visitation, I'm not so convinced that. Obviously it would be evidence for Catholicism, but I'm not so convinced that it vindicates Catholicism strongly over just other views on which you have a high Mariology. That's basically what I think.
Okay, so I mean, I think obviously there's a lot there. To break it down, first we can start with, it sounds like what your theory of the 6 apparitions is, which is basically something tantamount to fraud by Lucia, where
No, I don't think it was fraud. I think I said I don't think. I think she probably. I think there's also a good chance that he clearly did engage in fraud to some extent. He may have also believed that he was really having revelations in some way.
who?
I think Joseph Smith.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think he's a liar.
Yeah, he was a liar, but I think he also. I mean, I think that most of the
Oh yeah, I think he was
historians who study this
demon-possessed.
think he well maybe he was, but I think he probably did think that he was genuinely a prophet, even
Yeah,
though
I mean, I don't want
he
to get
also
too
engaged
much.
in fraud.
I mean, I don't want to get too much into
Yeah,
debating the specifics of the Mormon case, but because I do think we have
uh,
enough here to work with where,
yeah,
but what I'll
but
say
no,
is I
I
don't
don't.
understand exactly how Lucia notice for, 4 of the 6 apparitions, they're happening in front of very large crowds of people where we then have
Yeah,
transcripts from those people, statements that from those people where we can then cross-check what she reported in the interrogations afterwards with her half of the dialogue that was heard by the people watching the apparitions. So we basically are we can be very like confident in she enacted in real time and then remembered with fidelity the conversation that she had, right? So there's definitely either she's like LARPing or somehow she's getting like able to have a structured conversation with a natural cadence, and she's also like behaving as if she's being blinded by dazzling light intermittently, like actually perceptually blinded, and so then diverting her gaze, and the other people are sitting there fixating upon the location in space where they're then later going to come describe in specific fine perceptual detail what they saw.
uh, yeah. I guess I just don't. I mean, I think she probably. My guess again. I could be wrong, but my guess is that what was happening was some equivalent of her seeing things with her spiritual eyes. I think she probably thought that she was really interacting with the Virgin Mary. She did add things and change the story later, and whether that was later a confabulation or conscious fraud, I mean, how could I know?
Well, what are the
Uh,
examples of
but
that you think?
the story changing, well,
Yeah.
um, so as far as I know, there was no mention originally of the secrets. Maybe
No,
I'm wrong
that's
about
not
that,
true.
but
So
uh,
the existence of the secrets was announced in immediately after the July 13th apparition.
okay. So the secrets were there. Nothing about the content of the secrets is known because, of
Well,
course,
so actually,
they're secret, right?
so the thing that we actually do have, basically, um, so the content of the secrets is withheld during the year of 1917, and they
Yeah,
refuse to disclose them even when they're kidnapped by the local administrator and he threatens to kill them unless they tell him the secrets. They refuse to answer.
yeah,
So kind of
yeah,
heroic virtue. But
yeah.
anyways, the thing that then happens, um, is basically at least, and I'm not going to go through the full critical history, but at least by 1927, we know the secrets were written down and had been shown to at least 5 independent people.
Uh, and do these people? I mean, who are these people?
Yeah, so we know the specific
do we
names of
have
the
their
people.
yeah? Do we have
So
their confirmation? So I mean, here's my guess. Uh, my guess is that originally, um, because Lucia was a kid, she wasn't that worried about Russia. Russia was not communist yet. So even if she was worried about communists, maybe she wouldn't have been worried about Russia. Later on, in the 20s, she does start talking about Russia and talking about the need to consecrate Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary and so forth. To me, if she knew that preventing World War II was contingent upon this, like if somebody had told, if God had told, if the Virgin Mary had told me, unless Russia's converted to the Sacred Heart of Mary, is dedicated, is consecrated, then
Well, I have important context there if you
war,
want,
yeah,
which
okay.
is
Well, it.
in
Oh yeah, go on.
1937. Okay, so right before the outbreak of war, the Bishop of Liera, so the ordinary for Lucia's diocese, the Bishop of Liera wrote a letter to Pope Pius XI saying Lucia asked for the consecration of Russia to the Immaculate Heart and that war was imminent.
Yeah, but I mean that war was imminent by 1937 was not that surprising.
No, but I'm just saying,
I mean,
given that there's a
yeah.
conditional
So there
prophecy,
there was some mention. Okay, so there was some mention of war before the war happened.
well, right, and what I'm saying there is actually I can get more references, generic references to war, like for instance from Jacinta's deathbed in 1920. But the things that I actually, so that the content of the secrets included prophecy of war. But the thing that I'm saying here is that her behavior is not contrary to what you would expect, because she took efforts right before the war was going to break out to get the Pope to do the thing that would prevent war.
Well, I mean, my behavior would be like banging down the Pope's door, hunger strike outside. I mean, she finds out in the 20s that it's time to start telling people about the need to consecrate Russia to the Sacred Heart. And then the bishop sends a letter to the Pope in 1937.
Well, yeah, the 1937 letter. So there's basically, I mean, there's earlier references. It's 1927 is when she receives the permission of heaven to reveal the first two parts of the secret. And
Yeah,
that's
and
when
she's the only person who knows that this is necessary to prevent World War II. I think if God had told me the Pope needs to do this specific act to prevent World War III, and I know this, and then God comes along and God has done a huge miracle in the sky to vindicate me, and then comes along and says, all right, it's time to tell people, I would be like every day freaking out trying to get the Pope to do this,
well,
because
we
I know
know
what
that
he doesn't, like what the stakes
we
are.
know she at least believed it by 1937, and that she didn't do the thing you're saying you would do.
Well, wait, what specifically does this letter say?
Well, the letter is just saying that the consecration of Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary is necessary to prevent the war, the chastisement.
Okay, well, okay, then I guess she didn't start doing what I did, which is, I mean, that's also weird to me. But it's also weird that this hasn't this hasn't come up. This doesn't come up until it already looks like there's going to be a war. Maybe to step back, like a general thing that's weird about retrodictive prophecies is like when you're reading some text from the ancient world or whatever, you often find, okay, the great prophet so and so said X, Y, and Z, and then X, Y, and Z happened, and the great prophet so and so said, and therefore A, B, and C are going to happen, and then A, B, and C didn't happen, and then it feels like, yeah, pretty good evidence. Okay, this is like a document that was written right after X, Y, and Z had happened, because it gets things right up to that point, and then it doesn't get the rest of the stuff right. When you look at the secret about Russia, it gives all these details that there's going to be a light in the sky, that it's going to happen under such and such a pope's reign, et cetera, et cetera. It's odd that we didn't find. It's odd that like the only place where we get a super detailed prophecy is in the one that only becomes public afterwards.
Well, to be clear,
It's
the thing is that basically the hierarchy, which Lucia is obedient to, is the one who determines the date at which the prophecy is revealed in 1942. So that's the date when the hierarchy permits the publication of the secret. Now we know that decades before the publication of the secret had been disclosed in writing to large numbers of people in the hierarchy.
yeah. Do we know that it was? I mean, how do we know that it was the same text?
Well, basically, the answer would be that Lucia would be challenged by these people, by at least one of these people, if she had completely changed the text and they are still alive when it's published.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe.
Okay,
I guess
but you're the
yeah. I
one-
mean,
you're
I
the
guess
one
I
trying to
need.
make the evidential case against my obvious colossal miracle.
Oh yeah.
If this is supposed to
Well,
be an embarrassment for my case, that's one thing. But like, it's possible that lots of people lied.
well, I mean, I don't know. Did we go around to all of those people afterwards and ask them if they
Okay,
confirmed that this was exactly what they read?
it was
And
international news. It's like the biggest thing in the Catholic Church is, and you're personally directly involved, and it's on all these newspapers.
I mean, I think people. I think if you think about, say, the miracle of the Holy Fire uh, in Jerusalem,
We have those people saying
like
it's a lie.
you have some of them, but you also have dozens and dozens of patriarchs who have been complicit in this over time. Presumably because, you know, they don't want to deflate, or like the way that
No, but I'm just saying it
the
can't
the
be.
way that yeah, it doesn't.
It can't be an indictment of her credibility if the thing we have independent evidence for is disclosure beforehand, and we also have circumstantial evidence that lots and lots of elements of the secret suddenly become themes in her writings to people in these times.
Yeah. I mean, again, like exactly. Yeah. So I would need to look at exactly who is supposed to have seen the text and when and whatever. But
Like
it
she
it
literally
seems.
challenges. So there's a guy, Father Danis, who basically writes like a hatchet job on the apparitions and was like doing a skeptical investigation into the apparitions. And basically he goes to Lucia and he's basically trying to create this opposition between Fatima 1 and Fatima 2. And so just act like out of nowhere with the third and the fourth memoirs, the Fatima message completely changed discontinuously. So that's his thesis. And Lucia's response is, here's a list of people I told, go ask them.
Yeah. What the do we have his confirmation that he asked them and they confirmed it, or are we just assuming he would have asked them and found out and told people if?
Oh, well, there's separate arguments for, besides this guy reporting that he actually followed through on asking those people, for these people tacitly approving the content of the secret. But the point is just that the way she was approaching it was, these people are my vouchers. I mean, these people are the ones that are going to vouch for me, because I basically know that if you go to these people and you ask, which he had every reason to expect him to do, they're not going to be like, yeah, she's a liar.
Yeah, I mean, do you not? I mean, do you see why it's odd to me that we get like a pretty detailed prediction of events up to the point where it becomes public, and then we don't get super specific predictions of anything further. We didn't get like when the war is going to end. We didn't get any of that stuff. And to the extent that there are further predictions, now this will open up a different thing. But I mean, to the extent that there are further predictions, it doesn't seem like they're correct.
Well, that's another thing,
There's
which is those 2 points seem to be in contradiction. So either we're retrodicting, right?
yeah,
And then we get to just fit the prophecy to the facts. or we're mispredicting, in which case that's pretty good evidence we didn't make it up as a retrodiction.
Oh, no, I think she retrodicted the things that had happened and then inaccurately predicted
Wait, what is the
further
thing she
things, probably.
retrodicted that happened?
Well, I mean, the war happened.
But she didn't retrodict
And
that. Okay, so here's an
oh,
example.
well, I
Like,
mean,
if we take,
the
like basically here, let me give an example, which actually kind of fits with also how a lot of Old Testament prophecy works. But here's how it works, which is I think actually like a fingerprint of authenticity, even though it initially looks like a disconfirmation. So I think the same thing can actually be true for the end of the war prophecy on October 13th, which we'll circle back to. But
yeah,
this prophecy is the war will basically, the beginnings of the war will happen under the pontificate of Pius XI. And obviously, World War II wasn't formally declared until Pius XI was dead. It was formally declared under the pontificate of his successor. And so basically, if you were going to retrodict the war when you were formulating the prophecy in writing, you wouldn't have made it to where the way you interpreted the beginning of war was ambiguous in this way, where you actually were counting the beginning of the war as the remilitarization of the Rhineland, which is technically a fulfillment,
yeah, yeah. I mean, I mean, she may have just gotten the dates. I mean, yeah, who knows? But the thing I was thinking of as being incorrect, uh, if I mean, again, it's unclear whether the whether well, I'll just ask you: do you think that her request has been fulfilled?
No, I don't think so.
So she thought that it had been fulfilled, right?
Well, there's a whole bunch of, I mean, I think getting into
There
the whole
have been
controversy,
multiple, yeah, there have been multiple attempts to fulfill it.
the whole controversy about both Lucia's attitude towards whether the prophecy had been fulfilled and whether the third secret's been suppressed and what exactly is going on.
Yeah.
That I'd prefer to steer us back to the other stuff, just because this is going to get really murky and messy really fast. But
well, I mean, of course, I want to talk about it because that's the thing that's really in the future at the time the prophecy is made public. And there's,
well, no, I mean the main thing in
I
the
mean,
future is the obvious colossal miracle that we have photographs of and distant witnesses and hundreds of
no,
witnesses.
at the time the prophecy is made public, Ethan.
No, that was
in the
announced 3 months in
1940s.
advance.
No, sorry, the thing in The Secret About Russia that is in the future, at the time the secret about Russia is made public,
Oh yeah, well
is
the chastisement is being fulfilled. The conversion of Russia
is the prediction that about the conversion of Russia in a period of peace when the request is fulfilled. Of course, that has not happened. So if the request has been fulfilled, then that looks like an inaccurate prediction, right? That's what I'm saying. And
well, wait, why would that why would that one be a falsification?
Because Russia is not converted, and there hasn't been a period of peace.
No, but I mean, presumably, if you're saying that the prophecy's been fulfilled, like, are you talking about the consecration of Russia during the Francis pontificate?
Well, there have been like 3 attempts to do it.
Well, yeah, right? But a lot of them are just consecrations of the world that don't specifically mention Russia.
Yeah,
like, that's way too ambiguous to falsify the.
Yeah, so it gets a little bit. I mean, it's a little tragicomic if the Virgin Mary wants a particular formula said, and Lucia cannot determine whether that formula has been said, and the Pope cannot determine. There have been attempts done with the intention of fulfilling the request to fulfill this, and it hasn't been fulfilled. Yeah, I mean, obviously, what you should say is, okay, the request hasn't been fulfilled. It's just an odd. I mean, why hasn't Mary tried to clear it up or like make sure that Lucia knows the exact Mary really wants to convert Russia and bring about a period of peace, but like, no, you have to only say Russia during the consecration. And otherwise all these millions of people have to keep getting killed. Like, why? I mean, it feels very weird, and it feels
well,
a bit like a way that we avoid being able to falsify it, because like
well, I don't
we
think
can always,
so.
you know.
I mean, I just think the thing that we need to talk about in connection with this. So obviously, if you're asking for a consecration of something, the whole point is that it's supposed to be particular to that thing. So if I ask you to pray for me, and then you go home and pray for humanity, and you're like, well, that includes all the people that made specific prayer requests to me, that obviously is defective with respect to the intention of my petition. You know, if the entire point is to single something out in particular, to treat it as different, you know, like you're
Yeah.
like a consecration is a setting aside of something for a special purpose.
Well, I mean, Francis said, I mean, he did specifically say Russia, right? And like, if you ask me to pray for you and I pray for you and the person that you're fighting with or whatever, it's not clear that that is defective.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty clear that
Well, apparently it's not clear to the fucking Pope, man. Like, it doesn't seem like it's clear to Lucia.
well,
Like,
no, I mean,
you know.
for me, the way I look at this stuff is, you know, it's providential. So like the millennial reign of Mary and the triumph of the Immaculate Heart, like logically, the first pope that had the opportunity should have just done it by the book as to the best of their ability, given that we accept this as legitimate, you know, like that would have been what was logical for a person to do, you know. But I think there's an aspect of providence in the deferred fulfillment of the prophecy. But so like I don't think it's just random or coincidental that basically the
So
chastisement has gone on this
it's
long.
God's plan that the Pope will keep attempting to do the consecration and failing, and everybody will be confused.
Well, no, it's just the Pope is having like basically there's malice on the part of the people that are refraining from honoring Our Lady's intention because they're wanting to be like ecumenists, and obviously, I mean, it's just such a huge slap in the face to the Russian Orthodox to consecrate Russia in particular and to single it out for the Immaculate Heart in an attempt to secure the conversion of Russia to Catholicism. Like, and so like basically like there is a defect in the intention of a person who's dancing around the express intention of Our Lady, basically to please men.
Yeah, but I mean, and we never heard this from Lucia, right? As far as I know.
Well, yeah, she did condemn as defective the consecration of the world.
Yeah, but the later one, the one John Paul did.
I think she was dead during the Francis pontificate.
No, but the one John Paul did.
Well, that one also was another big problem. But I want to go back to talking.
It feels like it. Okay, yeah, we can go back. I'll drop this. It feels like if Mary needs an extremely specific thing to be said to bring about world peace and the conversion of Russia, one would hope that it would be conveyed clearly enough that at least Lucia would know and would be able to say, like, no, you need to say this specific thing. John Paul's didn't work, blah, blah, blah. And like, it would be super clear. And then we would have, then we would be able to tell whether the thing has happened and whether the future part of the prophecy came true.
Well, I mean, I think there's an aspect of like, I mean, first is I think,
or just if there had been, you know, some other. I mean, if there had been just something else about the course of the war, which side will win?
The principle that you're applying here overextends, and I think we can just use it to refute Christianity because we can pose a whole bunch of these questions for basically every conditional prophecy in the Bible, and you know, in the manner in which God has chosen to fulfill prophecy, you know, in the person of Christ and throughout history. But just there is an aspect where it's like God's will is inscrutable, and oftentimes he comes and he makes conditional prophecies mainly as a symbolic act because there's going to be some kind of signification from from the thing that people are then chastised or rewarded for doing. So it's not that
Yeah.
the thing's actually instrumentally necessary, but it's just there's some kind of like symbolic aspect to the petition that is God is using to convey some message, and there's an element of just like God is mysterious and inscrutable.
Yeah. Sorry, can I say just one more thing that's weird to me about the Russia secret? Well, I'll drop that point. It's also it's odd that the secret focuses completely on Russia, as like the cause of the war and blah blah blah, and not at all on like the Axis powers or anything. When like that's something that I mean, I don't know what Lucia's political views were, but like, she was living in an authoritarian, right wing, very Catholic country. What like that
I
feels
mean, it
to
was an
me like,
anti-clerical government at the time.
yeah, okay, I mean that's fine. Which of course she wouldn't like, but like that the focus is on Russia feels weird from the Virgin Mary and like not as weird from
Right. I mean, the worst
a
thing that ever
conservative Catholic.
happened was the Soviet Union. I mean, the intense. Like, have you ever read that book, like Anti-Humans? Because, like,
No.
I mean, just when you read about the things they did, in terms of like sacrilege and desecration and like torturing religious people and like the barbarism towards the Virgin Mary and what they did to Catholic people and what they did to Orthodox people, and just the scale and the gargantuan proportion, as well as that just being like the epical struggle of the 20th century is like, state communism versus.
Yeah. I mean,
I think
I agree that the Soviet Union was bad.
and
I'm
then
just saying
obviously
that
there's like a historical debate about like was actually the Soviet, what was the role of Russia in World War II, but blah blah blah. But
yeah, well, I mean, I think at, at least some of the blame has to go to the Axis powers, Ethan, in my opinion. And it's odd that Mary is focused entirely on Russia. And not so odd that Lucia who's had this long-standing
I'm
worry
just
about
saying,
Russia
I
and
just think,
communism,
like,
whatever.
would it make sense?
Um,
So there's one question, which is, would it make sense for there to be an emphasis on Russia that singles out Russia uniquely, given the history that unfolds in the 20th century?
but just
Then there's a separate question, which is like, is the Virgin Mary going to exhaustively list every bad political regime that's going to rise?
no, but
is the Virgin
but
Mary going to be and
I'm
also Pol Pot?
yeah, probably not. But I'm thinking specifically about. Oh, it would be impressive actually if she had mentioned Pol Pot, because that would be in the future, right? That would I would if she predicted Pol Pot, then like shit, how did Lucia know that? No, what I'm thinking of specifically is the fact that you read the text and the problem about the war is Russia spreading her errors throughout the world, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's an odd way for Mary to frame what the war is about, and like in a way that again I don't think that this it just feels more like if you think in Bayesian terms, it feels more like something that would originate with Lucia to me.
Okay, I mean, my whole thing is just like, I feel like all this stuff is just so low on the evidence hierarchy compared to looking at the evidence directly for authenticity, rather than just being like, would God do it this way or would he do it that way? Blah, blah, blah. This seems less fitting, that seems more fitting. Like, sure, I mean, if we had very little to go off of, then those sorts of conjectural inferences, maybe they would have weight.
Yeah.
When my evidence is, I think I have photographic proof that there was like a localized emitter that spontaneously formed 3 kilometers south of the cova, date, time, location,
Yeah.
in advance.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, I mean, part of the issue is just that my evaluation of the other evidence is much different from yours.
Right, but that's but what I think
so
is fundamentally the problem is basically we should first establish whether all the direct evidence for authenticity is overwhelming or whether it's just sort of like, okay, maybe you have a preponderance, but it's very slight, and now we need to start doing conjectural stuff, to break the tie.
Yeah. Should we talk, I guess, as long as we're on the prophecy thing, should we talk about the war ending?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that one I think is actually pretty clear cut, which is what we have is, on the one hand, from Lucia, we have her later recollection, which frames it as an unconditional prophecy, right? And I think this is actually strong evidence for two things: the sincerity of Lucia and the low suggestibility of Lucia. Because she's confronted with, hey, look, it looks like the war hasn't ended. You said it was going to end that day, didn't you? And she's like, yeah, I don't know. All I know is what the lady said. She said what I said she said. And then Formigal is just sitting there and he's like, what? He's like, okay, well, some people suggested that you said soon, not today. And Lucia's like, I said exactly what our lady said, She's refusing. So he's offering her a bone to make her story more believable. And she's saying, I have such a distinct memory of what she said that even though it's creating cognitive dissonance for me, even though I just got massively bailed out by this miracle that I predicted 3 months in advance, even though I was sort of, doing in some kind of weird delusive trance state, that suggests to me, okay, she has a clear and distinct memory of hearing this specific sentence, and she's not at all suggestible. So I think that's the first point to establish, which is it's a very good indicator of credibility for Lucia. Then second is that we actually can see that it was a conditional prophecy as it was originally formulated. And the evidence for that is Jacinta, questioned independently of Lucia by Dr. Formigal at this on same timetable as Lucia, says, I come to tell you not to offend our Lord anymore, that he was very offended, that if the people reformed, the war would end. So she gives a conditional version where Lucia gives an unconditional version. And basically, Lucia, writing in 1922, said, I had understood that Our Lady said to me, when I go back to heaven, the war will end today. But my cousin Jacinta said that this is what she had said. If the people amend their lives, the war will end today. That's why I can't affirm how exactly she pronounced these words. But furthermore, and so that's not just showing an independence, where Jacinta is remembering details that Lucia didn't remember, and then using that to correct Lucia in a way that is more coherent. So showing Jacinta having an independent recollection. But this is the key clincher. Dr. Formigal asks Lucia, didn't she say the apparition would end as soon as she reached heaven? Lucia said, I don't remember whether she said that it would end as soon as she reached heaven. So although the thing that she was super confident about was the clause, the war ends today, rather than the war ends soon, she couldn't remember the immediate context. But meanwhile, Dr. Mendez, who held Lucia in his arms, immediately after the apparition ended, Lucia was shouting, do penance, do penance. Our Lady wants you to do penance. If you do penance, the war will end. So that's what Lucia was saying immediately after, as opposed to a few days after. So basically, the coherent interpretation that we're getting is, she had heard it originally in a conditional form. She repeated it in a conditional form after the apparition. Jacinta remembered it in a conditional form, but Lucia took it, basically misremembered it into an unconditional form when she forgot the immediate context.
Yeah. So I mean, as far as I know, that may all be right. And I agree. I mean, I agree that she was not making it up in the sense of being a fraud, and presumably wasn't suggestible because she didn't give up under interrogation, whatever. It seems to me there are like two concerns. One is that it also does suggest that she can make pretty bad mistakes about what she was told. Like the patient is going to recover, and the patient is going to recover if they stop smoking. Those are like not at all the same. And if you were the doctor and you told the nurse to convey that message, the patient will recover if they stop smoking, and the nurse thinks that it's the patient will recover. I mean, that's totally different, right? So like it's some hit again, not dispositive, but it's some hit against just her reliability in conveying messages, assuming that she really was getting them from Mary. And then the
Well,
second
I
thing
think
is
it actually
just,
shows you that there's a good relationship between her confidence and her accuracy, which is the thing she clarifies in the same interrogations with Dr. Formigal, is she clarifies that the thing she's sure about is that Our Lady said the war will end today, but she doesn't remember the surrounding context, right? And she clarifies that in response to a different question about the timetable for the war ending. But meanwhile, she's emphatic about the phrasing of today, which is the element she shares in common with Jacinta. So what I
yeah.
think we're actually getting from her is honesty about what she's forgotten that correlates with her coherence with her co-witnesses.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to say, and I mean, this is some, maybe you'll just not find this. I mean, I don't I don't think the conditional prophecy is true. I don't think that if those people had done penance, the war would have ended. Like, I don't think that's how the world works. The war was not close to ending. I don't think that a bunch of people saying the rosary in Portugal or whatever would have triggered a drastic divine intervention that would have made the war end then.
Okay, but that just seems to
Like,
beg the question of authenticity, because obviously, like the omnipotence of God could end the war, and so if God promised,
he could, but it's not. But it's not the way that God works.
well, I mean,
I mean,
so
when has that ever happened?
but I don't understand what's the independent motivation for saying God doesn't work that way.
Because it's never happened. I mean, lots of people have prayed for wars to end, and done drastic forms of penance, tried to end natural disasters, all sorts
Yeah,
of
but it's
stuff.
just about God
And
promise. It's about God's promise.
yeah, and it's possible that
In the Bible, God claims to do this.
yeah. Well, I think most of that probably didn't happen either.
Okay, yeah, but then it's
But
just
like,
I guess it's just a paradigm
but
issue.
in terms of history, insofar as we can verify it, yeah, I mean, it's possible that this is the one time that God really was ready to step in drastically into history and end the war if just these people prayed hard enough.
Well, no, I mean, the way I
and-
think the conditional prophecy works is God, at the time he issues the prophecy, also foreknows that it's not going to be fulfilled.
Oh, so it's like trivially true because it's a material conditional or something.
Well, no, it's just that God, when he makes these sorts of conditional prophecies, like for instance, just going back to like the book of Jonah, when God makes conditional prophecies, and if the prophecy is fulfilled, then he's going to relent, but if the prophecy
Yeah.
isn't fulfilled, then he's not going to relent. I think a lot of the reason why God issues those conditional prophecies is mainly to convey meaning through the prophecy. So letting people know, basically, okay, what is the theological significance of the fact that God made this benefit contingent on this merit, right? That is the reason that he's doing that, not because like that's actually the most like efficient way for God to affect the consequence that he wants to achieve.
I think the statement to be true in ordinary natural language, it has to be the case that there's some true counterfactual where if those people who could have heard Lucia repented, then the war would have ended.
Well, no, I do. I mean, I do also think God had the
and-
sincere intention that if the people did the thing, he
Yeah,
would do what he promised.
and
Just he foreknew they
just
weren't going to.
it seems like God does not have that sincere intention as a general rule. That's not how wars end, even though people pray really hard for them.
Okay,
And that makes me,
I believe in divine providence, so I think most wars, God plays a role in most wars, beginning and ending.
but we don't have examples of a war. A bunch of people go pray in Portugal, and then a war a long ways away abruptly ends when I mean, I don't think there were even peace talks going on or anything. It's something fantastic would have to happen for the war to end right then. That would presumably require God doing something drastic. I mean, I don't know. And it just doesn't seem to me like the world works like that. Again, this is a broader world. I don't expect you to be convinced by this necessarily, but I think there's
Yeah,
some
I mean, I think this is just.
there's some inductive argument for this just not being a true conditional, and
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
just sort of
I don't
convenient that it
really.
turns out to be conditional.
I don't really buy into that. But the thing that's like going back, what I want to get at are basically the things that we need are 3 people to repeatedly, simultaneously, predictably enter into delusive trances where they can't tell the difference between imagination and perception, and then to like coordinate with each other so that they can converge on lots of specific details in questioning after the fact, right? And then we need them to embellish this prediction of basically vindicatory miracle is going to happen at this time, place, date, you know, and then on that date, we can get into the evidence for the authenticity of the miracle of the sun. So I already think the probability of that starts out like minuscule. Because I mean, it just that's not how confabulation works.
Yeah, I don't agree that that's what we need. I don't think that they were all in delusive trances. I think probably they were in something similar to whatever the Book of Mormon witnesses were in, which is some way of like thinking that you're seeing things when you're really just imagining them, which can happen in religious contexts to large groups of adults, and probably also could happen to like a visionary child and 2 suggestible little cousins.
So to be clear, the Book of Mormon witnesses are people where we can't verify what they saw, what their behavior was during this event. And it seems like it's like an isolated event where it's just an agreement.
I mean, we have their testimonies about what they saw, and in some cases they were in groups.
No, but that's what I'm saying is that with the Fatima seers, we can verify their behavior during the event and immediately afterwards.
Yeah, but I mean, what about their behavior is not something that could have been.
Well, so let's just take an example. Lucia is behaving in the way that a person being blinded by something they were physically seeing, dazzled by something they were physically seeing, would behave. So she's averting her gaze.
Yeah.
And then she's explaining that reflexive behavior as I was being dazzled by brightness.
Yeah, I think she thought that in some visionary sense she was being dazzled by brightness. Like, I mean,
She was saying she was physically blinded. She couldn't see.
yeah, I mean, the Book of Mormon witnesses also describe things in very physically seeming terms.
Okay, I mean,
I
want to look at the Book of Mormon witnesses and let's see if this is actually true. I mean, I think it's generally
No,
bad
they
to
do.
form your theories of psychology based on speculations as to what you assumed happened in the unverified cases when those conjectures go against what we can see people do in any of the cases that we can verify.
I'm talking about, I mean, if you look at the statements that they signed in the beginning of the Book of Mormon, it really sounds like, yeah, they picked up the book, they leafed through the pages, they saw, I mean, or, I mean, bereavement visions, people describe those in very physical seeming terms.
Yeah,
I don't think that that's what this was, but
I mean,
it's just.
the bereavement visions, we can go into that, but the issue here is basically, so let's think about what the different witnesses are, because like with the Mormon case, there's like the 3 and then there's the 8, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And the 8 are just people who said, I saw plates, right?
Yeah. Well,
I'm pretty sure they did see plates.
I don't think they did see plates. And Martin Harris years later said that they didn't see plates. I think what there were
Martin Harris was one of the 3 witnesses who was the visionary witness to the angels.
Yeah, but he also said later on that I think you might be right that he's not one of the 8 who signed it. But he says later on, years later, we didn't see any of this stuff with our physical eyes. I didn't, nobody else did. This was with our spiritual eyes. I think
Yeah,
Joseph
but
Smith,
there's a
he
distinction
had some,
between. So there's the three witnesses who, to me,
yeah,
easily could be liars, easily could be retrospective memory effects, easily could be a million different things, easily could have been mystical from the beginning, right? And we just don't have at all an evidence comparable to what we have for the seers to authenticate what their behavior was when they supposedly had this experience.
but Ethan, if I was standing there and like one of them covered his eyes and said, "Oh, it's blinding," I wouldn't think, "Oh, he must really be seeing the angel Moroni."
Well, if you saw the guy and he was behaving as if he was seeing something, right? Then
Yeah.
it starts to raise for me these probabilities. I mean, these possibilities. So
Well,
one is the
I
guy
think
is
he
a
was. I'm
liar,
sure. I mean,
which seems very possible for the Mormon people because a lot of them are liars. Then
yeah,
second is, and the three could easily be liars. Like there's a ton of consistency issues with those guys. But so one is the guy's a liar. And I can talk about why I don't think that's plausible for the Fatima seers. The second thing is the guy is a nut job, so he's psychologically unbalanced, right? Or he's actually having some kind of weird hallucinatory experience where he's behaving in a way I wouldn't expect people to behave during hallucinations, and I would be kind of surprised. Or three, which is definitely a distinct possibility on my worldview, they saw something and it was diabolical.
yeah. I mean, I guess I think we have pretty clear evidence of what happened, which is that they thought that they could see things with their spiritual eyes. That's what Martin Harris says. Um, that also makes sense of, you know, I mean, if Joseph Smith really had plates, why were some people not allowed to see them? Why did they disappear at the end? Seems like he had things that couldn't pass visual inspection, and that's why we have these reports of him keeping them under a cloth. It's also their reports of the plates don't match up, which fits better with these being visionary experiences of some sort. I know. I mean, I guess you don't want to get derailed too much on this, but like, it seems to me that they probably were genuine. I mean, it was kind of a lot of people to be in on a conspiracy, none of whom ever renounced it, even though some of them had fallings out with Joseph Smith. And just in visionary religious context,
Well, no,
people
but
can
the thing that actually
conflate
happened,
these things in weird ways.
like to be clear, it's just not analogous evidence at all, because it's just like for instance, the statement that was originally composed was drafted by Joseph Smith, and he's pressuring everybody to sign it.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
the language was not the language that the witnesses volunteered. It was the language that Joseph Smith is socially pressuring them to adopt.
Yeah, but also, I mean, there was nobody else there at the first vision. Right? They didn't get interrogated until much later. So like, we don't know what happened between Lucia. I mean, as far as I know, we don't know what happened between Lucia and her cousins in terms of like establishing that they're on the same page and whatever.
Well, we have a pretty good idea because the thing that we can see, so there's a few things we can do to check for independence between the accounts. But one thing that I think is pretty good to mention is that we know that on these 6 occasions, these people are standing there, and either there's a total disparity between what they're perceiving and then what they're reporting immediately afterwards to people about what they perceived, or they're lying, or they're delusional. Those are the options. So either you're seeing an extremely beautiful, radiant woman standing at a specific location in physical space, and then you're reacting behaviorally to that as if you were physically perceiving it. And a bunch of people are independently attesting that that's happening.
Yeah,
and then you're having real-time dialogue that's sort of complex and coherent. And you're having that, and you're doing a cadence that is natural for conversation.
yeah. I mean, I think I think they were having some sort of imaginary experience that they took to be like a real visionary experience. It doesn't seem that weird to me that you might then react in ways that were appropriate. Um, I mean, if the argument is like, well, how could Lucia have? It's also, I mean, didn't like one of the kids couldn't see her, and they didn't always agree about what she was
they
wearing,
all could see her. The problem was that
or one,
Francisco couldn't hear.
yeah, one of them. I mean, why couldn't he hear?
Well,
That's odd.
There's a few things. I mean, odd doesn't mean didn't happen when the entire point is it's a miracle, you know. But
Yeah, it
the
just
odd,
it fits, but it fits better with there's something funny going on, you know.
no, because it's actually bad news, I think, for the other theories, which might have been the reason why it happened, which is that when you actually have the modal asymmetry between the kids, then first is that is a very unlikely asymmetry to enforce with suggestion. Okay, so for Francisco to be saying that he's seeing it, but then in this self-effacing way that he's never hearing it, even though these other people are hearing it, and then for him to keep reiterating that and then describing in detail what he saw, right? That's suggesting to me that basically he's not just this hyper suggestible person that's just assimilating whatever Lucia is imposing upon him.
It suggests that there are limits, but like I don't know. It just I think we must just have like broadly different models of human psychology or something. It doesn't seem to me that weird that somebody could be suggestible enough that I'm like, oh, can't you see the Virgin? Can't you see her white dress? Blah blah blah. And you're like, yes. Can't you hear what she's saying to us? And you don't know what I think she's saying. Um, and like it just doesn't. Again, if like the kids had been kept in isolation from the moment of the first vision, but then it would be different. But it seems like there was plenty of opportunity for them to get paid and like
Well,
I don't know.
what
I
we
mean,
can
they
think
could.
about. So one thing we can look at is if these people are really suggestible, then one thing that's interesting is actually in the interrogations when we use all these police tricks to try to make them contradict themselves and to use all these loaded questions with false premises, and then they're refusing the loaded question with the false premise by negating the premise rather than assimilating the premise and then proceeding with the assimilated false premise. So there's a bunch of stuff that we're getting to see from these kids where they just seem unusually resistant to suggestion, and they're converging to a very high degree on the details in a way where it's like it would have to be a ridiculous level of coordination very soon after the events to get a script, and then they don't stick to a stereotyped script, right? I mean, it would be hard.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd have to look at the interrogation records, which I haven't done.
But I mean, it's also just, I mean, we can look at the content of the dialogue and we can see what we would expect from childish invention, and like this just like simplistic, very minimalist, like theologically austere dialogue that's also very self-effacing without any of the sort of elements that I would expect from a child confabulator. So like this narrative drift and inflation between incidents,
Yeah,
and
I
like
don't know. I mean, you can watch the movie Jesus Camp and see, little kids in an evangelical church giving sermons, saying prayers, while um, and uh, and I mean, it doesn't sound childish. It sounds as sophisticated as what the adults are saying. It's, what they're saying is stuff that they've picked up from the adults mostly and are reworking. Um,
well, I mean, I would disagree, and I think we can look at specific elements, but regardless, I think you have to say I would expect there to be some kind of positive evidence for the confabulation theory from the children if they are having to do this over 6 months in repeated interrogation settings. Like, if in fact this were like a DS thing where there wasn't actually shared content between them, I would expect there to be some kind of smoking gun that would show up given that level of scrutiny.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there are places where they do disagree. There are also, I mean, I haven't looked at the things, but the the blog post by that guy trying to debunk you on the kids' psychology. I mean, he suggested that sometimes it looks like the kids were being interrogated together, which would also be a confounding factor.
Well, no, what we have are just many cases where they were separated, which I think is what's relevant.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know exactly when they disagree, that's just, oh, that's proof that they're not lying, they're not that suggestible. What they and then when they agree, that's proof. I mean, I don't know
I mean, I
exactly
just view,
what
I
I
view
don't
the
know what I
critical.
don't know what yeah, I don't know what smoking gun we would expect exactly.
Well, there's a few things that I think we could get that would be pretty easy to get. But wait, before I say that, let me answer on that point, which is just like, I think the level of agreement that you want is this Goldilocks agreement, where you're saying, I want enough variation to where these accounts are plausibly independent, you know? So they're definitely not stereotyped. So there's differences in emphasis, right? And there's slight differences in recollection that suggest that you weren't like repeating and rehearsing, right? That are just like normal human memory failure from someone who's generally reliable. But also, for the most part, substantial agreement about all the particulars. So maybe you vary on a few particular details, and maybe you emphasize different things in your descriptions, and you're not exactly the same to where you're basically repeating a shared script. But I'm simultaneously getting evidence for general reliability, convergence, and independence. And so that is kind of like a Goldilocks zone that we're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, we'd have to, because that's sort of this holistic judgment, we would have to, I guess, go through exactly what the nature of the documentary evidence is and blah, 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 which I admit that I haven't done. And realistically, I'm
Sure.
probably not going to do.
But I think it's also a I mean, I would like to see basically comparable examples of the types of imagination, perception, confusions happening that we're claiming are happening in this case. Because I just think that is extremely, extremely uncommon, where the prior for that should be very low.
Yeah, I mean, in some sense, I agree that it's pretty low. I don't think it's like incredibly low, because I think there are other examples of people in religious contexts having these sorts of things happen, and then obviously there's a selection bias where like all the billion Catholic kids who don't have this happen, we're not talking about, yeah, I mean,
I think that perception, imagination, confusion, as best I can tell, like to the extent that we can gather like observational data about frequencies, it is extremely, extremely rare. Like, I mean, I don't, and I think to also get co-witness memory conformity, the probability that that would also happen and conform perfectly to the pre-announced schedule and be able to be done 6 times.
Oh, well, I don't think it's weird that it conformed to the schedule, because I think that they were, I think that things were probably being suggested by Lucia, you know.
Well, no, but that's
I
the
think
point, is
when,
whatever it is needs to be a voluntary mechanism, because they need to be able to enter into whatever this delusive trance is, basically on
yeah,
demand.
well, it doesn't have to be voluntary. It has to be something that can be that can happen because you're expecting it to happen. it doesn't have to be voluntary in the sense that you could just at will make it happen, because you have to believe that it's going to happen because of some outside force or whatever.
Well, no, because what you're saying is, so first is for it to be expectation driven, basically, if you have an expectation driven effect, either you're going to have a voluntary mechanism and it's just subconscious volition that's basically inducing the effect, but it's something that you can sort of cue on demand, or what it is it's going to be a priming effect to cue you towards an interpretation of an ambiguous stimuli. But you like what doesn't happen is basically like you can have priming that can modulate like forced confabulation. So when I'm literally like I'm driving you to confabulate, so I'm sitting there and I'm being like, "Don't you remember blah blah," you know? But the thing that it really can't do it for is spontaneous confabulation. So basically, I'm just going to send you here, and I'm going to say, basically, you're just going to say on demand, "Okay, I'm expecting to see an apparition. Okay, I'm seeing it," and then you can just do that perfectly reliably on 6 occasions. That's the thing that's not plausible for like involuntary, spontaneous expectancy effect.
Yeah, I guess what I'm imagining happening is that you're sort of there is some sort of imagination confusion. I would guess that, I mean, maybe they weren't exactly confusing it with physical perception. Maybe they knew it was special in some way, but I mean, they knew that, I guess, other people couldn't see her and stuff.
What they were,
So they had to know it was special in some way.
They were
Uh,
simulating a perceptual reaction.
Yeah, that, yeah, that just seems fine. Again, I wouldn't be moved if the people who saw Moroni simulated a perceptual reaction. I would just think maybe that's just something, I mean, maybe that's natural to do if you're having a visionary experience, even if it's not physical perception,
Well,
And
no,
so
but I mean, there's
what
the
I'm,
question of like, does this in fact happen? Which is my claim. So like you
yeah,
can say that subjectively, given your like toy psychology model that you have in your head of how people would react, okay. But my thing is just like based on actual data about how people do act, this doesn't happen.
people never, yeah, I mean, I don't know, maybe.
I mean, and if it did
What,
happen, it would have to be an extreme edge case.
yeah, well, I mean, it's clear that it's also an extreme edge case if the Virgin Mary talked to these kids. Like, whatever happened is an
I
extreme
mean,
edge
it's not.
case,
I mean,
and like
I think
that's why
Marian apparitions are like actually fairly common.
I mean, they're not that common.
Well, they're way more common than whatever you're saying is happening.
How many people do you know have had one?
Well, no, but I'm not saying it's something that happens every day. But it's like saying to someone like, I don't know anyone who has ALS, but I know it happens all the time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I would guess more people have ALS than have had Marian apparition, but I mean, admittedly, I don't know that.
No,
Um,
but my whole point is, I mean, if you look at the number of people who have like private religious experiences that I think could be veridical, I mean, that's actually very
yeah,
common.
yeah. But I mean, the general constellation of facts, where like the Virgin Mary talks to you and tells you all
Yeah,
this
like an
stuff, and yeah,
extraordinary
I mean
vision of
this,
Mary that would plausibly be called an
and
apparition.
then
Like
yeah,
that's like a
and then
multiple time in a generation event. That's what I'd say.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, it's an extreme edge case in some regardless of the theory.
Well,
Um,
no, but I'm saying there's a difference where like one of them is like the distribution that we're sampling from. We're basically just randomly sampling from the distribution of like all people in any type of perceptual episode, Then
oh,
the second distribution is I have a model that explicitly predicts that this will occur basically at a pretty regular schedule, but fairly rarely with this fairly constant temporal schedule,
no,
So like,
yeah, I don't think the relevant reference class is everybody in any kind of perceptual episode. I think
well, whatever
probably
the perceptual
people are,
mechanism is that mediates this, clearly it could manifest itself in a non-religious context?
Well, I think what primes people to interpret the imagination as like veridical contact with something is the like religious or spiritual or whatever context. And I think that's what
I just don't see any reason why it couldn't be, like fairies and ghosts and UFOs and all that. Like I think people could veridically interpret those easily.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe people do get confused about thinking that they saw ghosts sometimes when they're flying.
Well, yeah, but I think in those cases, I can see. Well, anyways, I think the thing to point out here is, I don't think there is an established mechanism that will produce this effect, and I definitely don't think you can get it for 3 independent co-witnesses and then get them to be suggestible enough to converge as reliably as they did afterwards, and then also get them to resist suggestion as well as they did.
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe we've just run this into the ground.
Yeah, okay. Then we can go to where we can probably
because I'm just going to wind up saying the same things I've already said. But
yeah,
go ahead.
So then I guess we can just go to the actual miracle of the sun. So basically, I have like a 4-prong case for the objectivity of the event. Okay, so I'm just going to start with what I take to be the most decisive evidence, but which I also expect you to probably set aside, which is just the photogrammetric evidence for authenticity of the miracle, which is basically just Professor Delors, at the Pontifical University of the Holy Cross in Rome, he has a peer-reviewed paper in Faith and Science where he basically did an analysis of the certified photographs. So he got the high-resolution scans of the photographs from the sanctuary, and he basically looks for shadows, and then he does projective geometry to be like, okay, so this was the depth of field, this was the horizon, and then all the shadows in the photograph converge to this vanishing point. So then we can infer the angular elevation of the light source based off of the shadows, which will converge to that vanishing point. And then we can just do the math and say, okay, so the angular elevation, the centroid for it is like 28 degrees. The maximum is around like 32 degrees. The known solar position would have been 42 degrees. So then we can say, okay, so we're super robust to air. There's like a delta of 10 degrees from where the implied position of the sun in the photograph versus the actual position that the sun would have been had it been the authentic sun. So then through that evidence, we can just sort of directly exclude the hypothesis that the gaze source was the sun. And I'll pause there to just confirm that you're just going to be like, yeah, I can't.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're correct that I don't have much to say about that. I guess, prima facie, like the Scott Alexander point that there has to be something wrong with this because it seems like way more people should have seen it who were not primed to see it. That sort of seems plausible to me, though I haven't looked into it a lot.
Well, basically,
but
I don't know if you read my response to Scott Alexander, but
no, I haven't. I didn't realize you posted it now.
Okay, yeah, so I have a full-length response to him, but basically that in that article, I explain that basically I went back and I looked at the 1911 census, and I saw in the 15-kilometer area surrounding where the LSA, so the hypothesized anomalous light source, would have been, in the 15-kilometer radius around that, there would have been about 40,000 people. Okay, a huge fraction of them would have been in areas that basically just had terrible sight lines to the source. So like they just wouldn't have seen it if they had stayed home. Okay, then another huge fraction of the remainder would be actually in physical attendance at the Cova, given that we have a crowd of 100,000 there, and most of it is going to be drawn from the people in the surrounding areas. Then we know that it was basically raining, and there was a localized break in the clouds, which is what created the visibility of the source from the Cova. So then you also have just very poor visibility because of basically cloud obstruction of the source. And then at the 15-kilometer radius, the source is appearing at an elevation that's really low down on the horizon, so like 4 to 8 degrees. So it's just very easily obstructed by stuff like trees.
Yeah, but I mean, there are also other miracles of the sun where you have very similar effects, and I guess we also don't have massive numbers of people who aren't primed seeing the thing, right?
Well, the thing we have, so I mean, we actually have good distant witness evidence in this case, which I also review in my article because Scott kind of butchers it. So the first thing that happens is basically from the nearby village that had really ideal visibility because they basically had a clean horizon in the Fatima direction, and they were elevated relative to Fatima, so relative to the Fatima plateau. So they're basically looking down, and they just have this clear sweeping horizon towards the Fatima sector, sky sector. Those people, they had two groups, basically a hill group that was about 20 people who went like a kilometer away from their village center and then started looking towards the source. And they basically described like literally exactly the same thing that people saw from the cova. So the exact sequence, multicolored light, everything like that. Then you have the people at the village center. So the guy who is at school, and basically he also describes basically the same effects that people saw from the cova after he runs out because he hears the people screaming. So those are the people that basically are like the best, most vividly descriptive witnesses, two groups of witnesses that had the best visibility towards it, where we have statements from them. Then, and I can make additional arguments from them, which I do, which is just like they describe a spontaneous, localized break in the clouds. Here's the problem. If you're looking from that city, so Albertel, if you're looking from that city towards the sun, you're looking down a different corridor of clouds than from the cova, because you would be looking basically 180 degree azimuth. Okay, so you're looking straight south, and cova's looking straight south. Now they describe themselves as being looking towards the cova, which actually makes sense because it means that one break in the clouds could have opened LSA for both sightlines. But what you have to say happened is basically around the same time the two extremely rapid cloud clearings happened in independent corridors of the sky. Okay, and then the effects followed from that double coincidence of those clearings. And you also have to say that even though the lady who said there was rain during the entire time that the event was happening for her while she was stuck in a ditch, who's one of the negative witnesses that Scott cites, she's in a city called Taurus Novus, and that's due south of Albertel. So if it was raining there, the sight line to the actual sun should be blocked from Albertel. But anyways, so we have good witness testimony there. Then we have the Mind guy, who's basically the schoolboy who said he was looking in the direction of Fatima, which is another undesigned coincidence where he's looking in the opposite direction of where the true sun would have been. And basically, he describes seeing the falling sun. Then you have a lady in Liera, okay, and so that's super far away. And basically, she's looking towards the mountains, and what she sees is a red flash. So she's clearly not staring at the sun. And two other workers see it with her. Okay. And then we have the Bishop of Liera contemporaneously in like November of 1917 saying people saw the event from Liera. And the big problem there is obviously, first, if she's looking towards the mountains, solar azimuth is not in the direction of the mountains relative to her vantage. But second is the red flash makes perfect sense given that LSA was an objective emitter. The reason it makes perfect sense is because if you have light that travels a really long optical path and it's multicolored light, it'll scatter out everything except the long wavelengths, like red. That's why the sun can appear deep red when it's really low on the horizon, because that's when the light passes a really long optical path. So it's basically exactly what you would expect if there had been a multicolored light that was crossing at a grazing angle over these mountains. You would expect her to report seeing a red flash. Then you have the poet guy, and I mean, I'm not going to go into it, but basically we can be really confident that we have doubly attested testimony from this poet and his wife, that they both saw it. And then basically, and he's really far away. And then the thing I found, which Scott didn't know about, was basically two witnesses. One was 160 kilometers away, another was 120 kilometers away on beaches. who saw it.
Yeah. So I guess yeah, I mean that's all interesting. Um, it seems like, so I mean, what maybe this will be helpful. All of these other proposed miracles of the sun, do you think that those are also really miraculous, or do you think that those are debunkable somehow?
So yeah,
Because
I think
I mean, the reason I'm going to ask is because uh, if those are really miraculous, it seems like, and they're doing things like changing the earth different colors, whatever. It seems like we should just have lots and lots and lots of witnesses who are not primed who see these things. But go
well,
on.
the thing we have basically, so there's two examples that Scott has that I think are like analogous to Fatima in some respect other than just they involve the sun, you know? And basically the two that I think are best are basically the there's like an Italian one that happened in like the 40s, the like gay variations or whatever he called it. And then but I don't know how to say the Italian name of the city. Let me look it up. How to say it. So I just keep butchering it. Okay, apparently it's a word that means gravel, so I'm just gonna say that. So there's the gravel one, and then there's the Benin City one. So the gravel one, basically, that one you do have distant witnesses. And Scott's gripe is, okay, but you should have seen it at this really big city, not just in this other city that was in this other direction. Because in Scott's opinion, the big city had a better line of sight. Now, I don't actually think it's true that that city would have had a better line of sight. I think it just sensitively depends on details of implementation that we don't have data that constrains. But like, because the problem is, because he's talking about Milan, and basically the problem there is versus the place where we have distant witnesses is Tavernola. But there's lots of ways that where you could create the geometry of the source to where it wouldn't be visible from Milan, but it would be visible from Tavernola, even if it was emitting isotropically. And there's no reason to think it actually was emitting isotropically anyways. That's another unmotivated assumption. But also, like, basically notoriously, the valley that separates the place where the emitter would have been from Milan is like extremely hazy in a way that would have messed with light being, traveling, being transmitted that was really low on the horizon, blah, 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 blah. So that's kind of boring. But like, I think the deeper, more conceptual point is like, there's no reason why the physical implementation has to be exactly the same. And there's no reason why the intended scale of the miracle has to be the same if it's authentic. So it can be that God wants to limit the scale relative to Fatima because he wants to preserve the distinctiveness of the miracle of the sun, while he's also doing something that's analogous and that varies on some of the same motifs. And so, like, I think there's good evidence for the gay one, being objective. As for Benin City, that one just is happening at an event that's like a 100th anniversary commemoration of Fatima, where it clearly is subjective, where we can just prove it was subjective because it doesn't show up on video, right? But the people are reporting a phenomenology that's similar to what the Fatima witnesses saw. And to me, it just seems easy to say the intended purpose of that one was just to be like a more limited recapitulation of the miracle of the sun to commemorate it and to lend credibility to it for, this crowd of people that gathered. But it wasn't actually to replicate the miracle of the sun in its implementation.
Yeah, I mean that's possible. It's I mean, yeah, sure, that's possible. Um, it does seem odd. It doesn't seem like it's what you would expect to me. Um,
I mean, it does actually kind of conform to how God does other miracles that I accept, which is basically like if you take Eucharistic miracles, there's an element of commonality and there's an element of variation between all of the cases. And so there's basically motifs, like for instance, always using AB blood, right? But then there's variations where you're like, okay, in this case, the heart tissue is actually from a patient that's in cardiac arrest, versus in this case, it's not, in this case, it's, anyways, I won't go through all the details, but the same thing is true for Marian apparitions. Like the way that Mary does vindications, in Lourdes is by a whole bunch of healing miracles in connection with the pilgrimage site. Meanwhile, with Fatima, it's through like a predicted in advance spectacular one-time event, And so, I mean, you're just going and looking, and it seems to me that this is the way God operates. This is kind of his MO, which is
Yeah.
his commonality and variation in implementation.
I mean, I guess I'm going to say the opposite. This just makes me wonder about these other purported miracles as well. And I mean, I guess there's some maybe like, again, to sort of back things up to some general methodological points or whatever. It's just, even when I'm not sure like what to say about every exact piece of evidence, it feels very suspicious to me that the effects are like similar to what people on r/Sungazer get. The effects are, there are other cases where okay, so this was maybe a genuine miracle, but it had to be implemented differently because it doesn't fit the evidence here. There are other cases where there are like heretical apparitions and people seem to get similar, and like even if there are slight differeces, blah 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 blah.
Well, the heretical stuff is kind of not credible. Like the stuff like the Lubbock one, where it's like you have a huge contingent of skeptics that are viewing the event and say they saw nothing.
Yeah, but the other people did think they saw something.
No, but I'm just saying you have a clear contrast between the evidence sets in the cases where it's like, in this case, you have a whole bunch of strongly motivated skeptic people who then are shocked and impressed,
Oh, because the skeptics saw that, or at least some of the skeptics saw the thing at Fatima and not at Lubbock.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it just Mary decides to do using this just totally random natural phenomenon with like nothing to do with it. Yeah, or I mean, not I want to say using this totally random phenomenon that like doesn't have anything to do with anything really. It's not particularly relevant to the content of the message. It's not particularly relevant to Mary. Again, like the sun could have turned blue, and then I'd be like, "Oh, blue, Mary's color."
Well, it did temporarily.
And yet, well, among like a bunch of other things. I mean, and I don't think everybody reported it turning blue. Like some people give different. Some people saw the fireworks shooting out, and some don't mention it.
One thing that Scott was really helpful in is establishing the degree of convergence, where basically what you see are everybody is reporting details of the event and in an order that matches, but some people are including some details and omitting others, and others are including different details, but they're all drawing from basically the same pool of details in the same relative orders, right? Which is kind of what you expect, which is just people emphasizing different things. And then when you look at things like the Meet the Witnesses book and like people like Hafford, people will volunteer when he's interviewing them certain details, and then he'll ask, did you also see this? And then when the person is given the opportunity to say yes, they say yes.
Oh yeah, so maybe everybody saw the fireworks and they just didn't mention it.
Right, well you see this, and it's something that's actually weird when you read the Jackie book, which is just that it turns out like a lot of our intuitions about witness reportage are just demonstrably wrong in this case, because people are seeing stuff and are not volunteering that they're seeing the thing that I think is coolest. So like people are talking about spinning really fast. I saw it spin really fast. And if you also saw the multicolored light that reflected off the environment, I would have definitely mentioned that. you know, that I would have mentioned that before the spinning, actually, but it turns out no, not for all these people. But
Yeah.
anyways, the thing that I think is,
Oh,
I mean,
sorry.
we obviously have some
I
individual witnesses that are very problematic, like where we just need to be like, this guy is seriously like making weird errors, you know? Like an example of people making weird errors is like we have multiple witnesses that said they never looked at the sun and saw the colors reflecting off the environment. There was a guy who literally explicitly says, to avoid optical illusions, I didn't look.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I need to look at that. It's weird that Mary decides to do this huge vindication. And it's like something that's just random that also is like quite similar to something that people on Reddit can
Okay,
experience.
maybe I should also
and like
mention...
maybe there are different, you know, and like sure maybe there are differences, whatever. It's
No,
just
but
it would have been
mention some of the stuff that I think is relevant about the sun gazing stuff.
yeah.
Because the thing that happens with the sun gazers is basically like the thing the sun gazers have figured out is that you can basically make yourself see any individual thing by causing physiological malfunctions by like overstimulating your retina, you know? So like the thing that they're showing you is that you can have idiosyncratic anomalous perception of like anything, basically. But what they're not showing you is that one, you're getting the conjunction of effects that are reported here converging between lots of people that are doing it in the absence of all the things that you always see, like actual after images, you know, and having dazzle glare and having photophobia, you know?
Yeah. I mean, again, I'm not saying there might not be some, but I'm inclined to think when the effect is like pretty similar to something that can just be accomplished naturally by people, you know, looking up at the sun on a cloudy day and blah, blah, blah. And it's not something that fits
Oh, but
especially well with
he's
the
totally wrong
supernatural.
about...
I mean,
Sorry,
like,
I
it's
did
just,
want to say the cloud thing, he's like demonstrably wrong about, which is like the cloud thing. This is one of the things in my reply article where basically my argument is that one, the cloud thing is inconsistent with the laws of physics, the testimony of all the witnesses, and Scott's own explanation for what happened. So basically you're looking at, with the clouds, first, we can just show through physical law, if the sun is at its zenith, so it's basically your light is traveling at the shortest optical path and the sun is at the peak angular elevation that it reaches. And so it's just the middle of the day, it's solar noon. If the sun is at its zenith, order of magnitude, I won't tell you the units, 10 to the 9. Okay, maximum glare, I mean, maximum brightness you can tolerate before you'll get glare is 10 to the 3. So you're 6 orders of magnitude higher. So clouds can attenuate sunlight basically in proportion to their optical depth. And if you're going to attenuate by a factor of 10 to the 6, you basically need clouds that are so thick that you couldn't possibly see the solar disk through them. So like Scott's thing about how you can see the sun through clouds and then it's painless to gaze at, that's not true. That's demonstrably false. That does not happen. And the thing about like the in terms of witness testimony, we just have abundance of testimony that there were times where the solar disk stood out in patches of clear sky where you shouldn't be able to see the sun, where there's no cloud coverage, that the cloud coverage was partial, it was non-uniform, it was intermittent, you know, during the event. So it just can't, and that would lead to a whole bunch of problems. Like it would lead to flicker glare that was way worse. So anyway, finally the inconsistency is that if it was not bright enough to cause discomfort, that's exactly when sun gazing effects happen. So if you were not bright enough to overstimulate the retina, which is what triggers protective reflexes, if it wasn't bright enough to do that, then it can't trigger any of the emtoptic phenomena that the sun gazers report. So there's just no way. Oh, and then the final inconsistency I would want to note is that if you look at his video of Benin City, because he's saying we need to give a unified explanation for all these cases. If you look at the Benin City video, the sun is overexposed to the camera. It's not covered by clouds at all.
Yeah. And so again, it's possible that if I had like a great deal of knowledge of optics and whatever, then I would nod along with all that. And I don't want to say that like what the sun gazers are seeing is the exact same phenomenon, et cetera, et cetera. It's just like if Mary wants me to follow the Pope, and the way she does this is I'm gonna like make a second sun appear in the sky and look like it's gonna crush everybody. That's a weird way to do it. And admittedly, yeah, divine psychology is hard. It could just be that it was done in a weird way. But then on the other hand, when it's like not incredibly different from naturally occurring optical illusions that happen when people stare at the sun, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that makes me really increase my credence that, worst case scenario is just this is something like these other kinds of optical illusions that we just don't understand very well. And that could be avoided either by, doing something with like no physical precedent whatsoever. The mountain lifts up off the ground and hangs there for 20 minutes or something. Or it could be avoided by doing something that bears much clearer signs of intention. A vision of Mary appears and she speaks to the people. Or again, even if it turned blue, I'd at least think, well, that's her color. And like, we don't have either of those things.
Well, we do have that
and so,
for members of the crowd saw apparitions during the event.
Yeah, but not everybody saw those.
Right, those are subjective.
I mean,
those aren't the
I think
objective
those
thing.
people, yeah.
Like the thing
I
that's
think,
completely unprecedented is the physical emitter that formed. I mean, obviously,
Yeah,
also
but
like the drawing, like nobody can explain
if
that.
if everybody had seen the apparition of Mary, then it would be different. Then I would think, okay, that can't just be an optical illusion,
Yeah, but I mean, obviously,
but
whatever spectacular event happens here is contextualized by the fact that it's predicted in advance in the context of the Marian apparition.
Sure, yeah, no,
like
I mean, I know that's what,
something extraordinary.
yeah. But the problem is that there are two possibilities. Well, actually, there's one possibility, which is, yeah, I mean, somehow or other, there is a connection between the prophecy and the occurrence. And like one is that, well, Mary was going to make a second son appear and hold Lucia to, but the other is, well, there's some sort of connection between everybody looking at the sun and then seeing the effects, right? And so it becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Well, then
and,
the question just becomes, can we exclude the sun as the gaze source? And so that's what we're trying to do, is make arguments that all the evidence says that it couldn't have been the sun, which is why the title of my response article is "It wasn't the sun!" But so that obviously, if the thing that happened was, a self-luminous emitter spontaneously formed because God orchestrated the energy flux in the lower atmosphere to create a spotlight diffuser system to create an optical light show that was specific to the cova, obviously that would be sort of fitting as a miracle rather than just causing people subjectively to have weird perceptual effects that are also sometimes natural. So then it just begs the question of, is my interpretation the better supported one by evidence?
Yeah, well, I mean, but you also think God sometimes does do the subjective thing, right? Because you think that's what happened at that other.
Yeah, but in that case, the thing we're trying to explain is why it doesn't show up in photographs, why there weren't distant witnesses, etc.
Yeah, I don't know. It just feels like there are lots of things in the world that I don't understand how they work, And if this was so important that divine omnipotence was ready to step in and like miraculously end the Great War, if these people prayed, surely it could have done something that bore like a clearer mark of intentionality, um, other than just the timing, which again maybe can be explained in the other way. I mean, I know you think that there's the photograph, and you know, and admittedly, I don't have like a detailed response to that, but like,
Well, I mean, I think the thing that's also pretty
it's
clear
it
in terms of objectivity is the drying, you know, which is you're just like, okay, we have a bunch of people where we can prove that there's a consensus of witnesses there was continuous precipitation until the miracle of the sun. There's meteorological data that says that was true. We can see photographs taken like the hour of the event where it's raining and people have umbrellas. We can see during the event the ground is wet. You know, there's reflections of dampness on people's like garments and stuff. And then we can see basically if it had been the Mojave Desert, you know, it would have taken hours for the clothes to dry. It wasn't the Mojave Desert. You know, the ambient temperature and humidity there mean the driving force for evaporation was nada, nothing. And then huge number of witnesses, my clothes were sopping wet, and then they became completely dry. So like, I'll just read one example. Mr. Luis Lopez went to Fatima, told us afterwards that although he had taken every precaution to avoid the rain because he suffered from bronchitis, he was soaked through from his feet to his waist. But as the sun came down from the sky, he noticed to his astonishment that he was completely dry. And then we have photographs of people being dry after the event. And then the most conclusive evidence is obviously in the context of all of that testimony, we have photographs that appear to depict infrared shadows on people's clothes. So wet-dry contrast patterns that match what you would expect. Basically, they're occluder shaped. So if this was obstructed from the rays of the LSA source, it's still soaked. So it's just recently exposed to the camera, but it would have been obstructed during a previous pulse. It's soaked, but then the rest is dry. And we see that. And Mark Grant, who's the guy that Scott defers to write the article, I mean, he gives the most ridiculous theory I've ever seen to try to explain away the evidence. But he basically says it's a bizarre, unknown, unprecedented photographic defect that simulated wet-dry contrast. You know, so it's just ridiculous. And if you look at specific properties of it, like, and his best analogy is like, I have other photographs from the same event that I don't think can be explained as IR shadows, but then we look at them and they very clearly can be explained as IR shadows. So he's just stacking up more evidence. But regardless, the thing is, and I mean, you can look at the photo in my article, and I think just common sense will tell you what the picture is showing. That's not a photographic defect. That's not what photographic defects look like.
Yeah, and again, I mean, I admit that I don't have a detailed response to that. Mary is carrying out the most spectacular miracle in all of history. And in order to differentiate it from optical illusion, we need to look at the fact that she dried people's clothes. Like it feels again to me like, you know, there's some bucket of things in the world where, you know, I don't know what they are, but like that's just because there's lots of stuff I don't know. And then there are some things in the world where I don't know what they are, and that it feels like genuinely unexplainable. Like I do when I read about Joseph of Cupertino, and you know, he's like flying around in front of all these people, and the skeptical explanation is like maybe he was a good acrobat, or like maybe everybody simultaneously got bread poisoning or whatever. Then I really do feel like, okay, it seems like probably this guy flew around and, you know, and even though this is, I mean, I grant that it's very puzzling. I don't feel that way about this. It just doesn't, like trying to, the miracle itself is so weird. And the things you have to do to try to rule out natural explanations, they seem like little nitpicky things, you know, rather than, I don't know. I mean, you're not going to find what I'm saying convincing, but
no, I get it. But what I will give you my model of miracles where I hope to try to accommodate that intuition, which is basically just the reason why the miracles are performed as external proofs of revelation is to make the obedience of faith reasonable while simultaneously preserving the psychological possibility of doubt. The way that you do that is you provide stuff where there's no rational explanation for the data other than authenticity, but that it also gives people this strong intuitive sense of like triviality or frivolity that leads them to kind of dismiss it. So they basically, it has rational force, but simultaneously you've given people an out that plants the seeds of doubt, which is just the frivolity of the evidence that proves authenticity. But like, to be clear, I think the stuff that I'm pointing to is not that nitpicky. It's like what Scott's theory was, like, let me just read it again at the end of the article so we can contextualize how ridiculous this sounds. There is some previously unknown optical illusion that potentially causes the sun to appear to change colors and spin. This phenomenon is rare and inconsistent and usually appears only after someone has stared at the sun for a very long time. This explains why it's only reported by a few weird Redditors who stare at the sun on purpose every day. The appearance of this illusion is somehow modulated by cloud cover. In normal conditions, it is almost impossible to summon without long periods of sun gazing, but when the sun is half hidden by translucent clouds, the illusion happens faster. Okay, and then he goes on to list all the things he can't explain. But regardless, we're saying that's our one theory, which is already pretty ridiculous as the explanation for why the 100,000 people that showed up for the vindicatory miracle where we win, you know, because the debate should have been over. It was like, okay, we're saying some kind of weird delusive trances are happening. They just said there's going to be some kind of conspicuous miracle. Okay, crazy conspicuous miracle was witnessed by 100,000 people. Like, debate over, right? And so now we have this like super desperate skeptical explanation that's super ad hoc trying to explain away the data. And then we go look and we're like, okay, what are our tiebreakers? Okay, if your thing is true, people shouldn't have seen it from far away. Oh, they did. If your thing is true, people that didn't look at the sun shouldn't have seen it. Oh, they did. If your thing was true, people's clothes shouldn't have dried off inexplicably quickly. Oh, they did. If your thing was true, the photographs shouldn't show that it wasn't the sun. Oh, they do. And so we just go through and we're saying this was already a desperate theory to begin with. And then we're just nailing it with every additional piece of data we can put on the table, we're excluding it.
Yeah. So I guess I think the problem with there's no rational explanation, but it's just this frivolous thing. It's just that there are lots of things that I don't have a rational explanation for, and like most of them are not miraculous. You know, I mean, I was thinking the other day about there was this park ranger in Virginia who got struck by lightning 7 times in his life, and you know, I wondered like what are the and I tried to do a calculation. It seems like that should have just never happened to anyone, getting struck by lightning 7 times. Like even if you figure, well, he was a park ranger, he has more exposure or whatever. So like, what are the possibilities? I mean, one is like God hated that guy and kept striking him. Yeah, but like, you know, I guess either like I'm mistaken about how likely that is, or something about that guy, I know not what, made him more likely to attract lightning strikes. And like, he's just the only guy in history who was also a park ranger who had that. Or there's something wrong with the purported facts. Maybe he made up some of the lightning strikes. You know, I mean, it's a weird story, but like, there are just lots of things that I don't know how they work. There are lots of things in the world that are weird.
Yeah, but in this case, it's pretty clear.
I'm not. Yeah, I'm not. I mean, it's interesting that in this case, it happened alongside the prediction about something happening. It would be a lot more convincing if Lucia had actually told us what was going to happen, or it would be a lot more convincing if the thing that happened was something that had some clearer hallmark of
Well, I don't know.
intentionality.
I think the atheist would be more upset about priming if she had described it in detail.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But
yeah, well, she could have written it. She could have written it down, and you know. I mean, there are ways to do this, right? It's not impossible.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem kind of out of character for how God would do it.
Yeah, the fact that the prophecy is just like something's gonna happen, and then like something does happen. That's impressive, but like the thing that happens is this weird thing that you know. I mean,
I don't know. It seems like the event was like the first thing is that it's like a confluence of anomalies that are all pointing towards the same interpretation, right? So it's not just I'm taking one isolated weird thing that happened and then singling that out. But notice what we're having to do to dismiss it, which is we're creating a conjunction of coincidences that all are pretty extremely improbable individually, right? So like we do the threefold delusive trance thing to explain the apparitions themselves. Then we coincidentally, in the context of that very credible claim, where there's a prediction made, we then have the unprecedented optical illusion that's never reported before but is sometimes reported after. That optical illusion coincides with this event when there's a spontaneous break in the clouds over Fatima, right? Then there's a bunch of distant witnesses. Who knows what we're going to say to explain those guys away? There's the drying. Who knows what we're going to say to explain that away? Doesn't seem like we can give a unified explanation. Seems like we have to dismiss a lot of particular testimonies as bizarre confabulations where Delors is botching the photograph analysis, whatever. So we're multiplying independent coincidences, the confluence of which has a coherent interpretation.
Yeah. I mean, I agree that it's weird. It's definitely very bizarre.
Or
like I said,
another one that's hard
also
to explain that is like an example of the frivolity. Sorry, I just remembered it. That like is going back to the multiple independent witnesses attesting that there was smoke, the mysterious cloud of smoke that forms over the home oak where the lady was said to appear, right when the apparitions begin and right when they end, and no other times.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean but again, I'm gonna say, that's also like, so Mary just made smoke come up. Like,
Yeah, well, what she's doing,
why should she do that? I mean,
because basically what she's doing is giving a fingerprint of authenticity, because that's an objective thing that's inexplicable, that's adding to the constellation of coincidences to dismiss the authenticity. But it's not doing it in a way that is so conspicuous, right? It's creating the element of frivolity.
yeah. I mean, I guess, when I initially I had read about Fatima a long time ago when I was a teenager, and I felt like, oh, that's weird. I don't know what to think about that. When I initially read your article, I did think like, okay, there's a pretty good case for thinking something supernatural must have happened here. And then like the question was about the inference from that to Catholicism, and I wasn't gonna become a Catholic, but I was initially, I leaned towards thinking like, yeah, okay, something super, and then I've sort of leaned away from that as I've learned more about it and thought like, okay, they're like similar phenomena, like it seems kind of credible that there's a, yeah. So anyway, point being, I'm not like so stubbornly skeptical that like I can't be moved by evidence. I could be moved by evidence. I was moved by evidence for like a day or something. Yeah, even though I wasn't going to convert to Catholicism. I don't know. She could convince me. I'm just, it feels, the whole thing, just, there are so many things that are weird and suspicious about it, that even though I agree that it's, it's a very interesting constellation of facts. Yeah, I'm just not persuaded. And I guess, I mean, another thing to say about the interesting constellation of facts is that, there have been lots of people who, there have been lots of religious visionaries, lots of failed prophecies, et cetera, inside and outside of Catholicism. And so again, there is some selection effect where like, it's not that weird if in one case, things lined up just right, and that's the one that we wind up talking about.
Well,
maybe it's still like, maybe it's still weird that they lined up this well or something like that.
Well, that's the thing where I have an issue with, because there's a normal thing, which I think is good reasoning, which is just like the Littlewood's Law counter argument to like Matthew will know what I'm talking about. Like there was this guy on Substack who described this like improbable series of coincidences that happened to him, and basically Matthew constructed like some kind of napkin math to show how staggeringly improbable it was, and so therefore it's a miracle, And like
Mhm.
the problem is like when the parameter space that you're searching through is so unconstrained and you're like just like sampling from it for every single person every day, you know, along every dimensions of all their experiences, then it's just like actually our intuitions for like how improbable the coincidences you can get like way undersell how improbable coincidences wind up happening. Like I think that right. Now the problem is when you at all constrain the space by saying I'm going to call the shot and predict it in advance, and it's going to occur in the context of like at least a somewhat credible apparition claim, you know? So that the sampling frequency from that is way too low to expect fits that are like where we're talking, you know, double digit exponents for improbabilities, you know?
Oh yeah. Well, there aren't double digit exponents, but there are lots of cases where people have called their shots and it was nothing happens, right?
Well, no, but that's what I'm saying is say we have these two constraints. Somebody calls a shot and we have some kind of minimum threshold for the credibility of the claim to be calling the shot because of divine revelation. So it's not just
Yeah.
that a person is like doing the Nostradamus thing where they're going out and I'm like, I predict that this will happen, and they put that on Reddit or whatever, but it's not occurring in the context of like God told me this would happen, you know. So like just at all credible claim that's just not someone who's like manifestly schizophrenic. Let's say
Oh yeah.
thousands of those happen or tens of thousands of those happen. You know, your chanciness ceiling is like I think way lower than the coincidence you need.
Yeah. Yeah. And it does. I mean, I agree. It may still be that it's like not, you know, my. I mean, yeah. How exactly do we assign numbers to these things? Um, but like, it may still be that it doesn't remove the mystery or it doesn't remove the improbability because like it doesn't make it super likely that something like this would happen. That could well be true. Um, I just think the fact that out of all the failed prophecies, whatever, one person predicted something is going to happen at a certain time, and then it did, and it was, something that was crazy and unexpected, but like also not something that clearly bore marks of intentionality, apart from the fact that it happened at the right time. That doesn't strike me as like clearly astronomically probable or something.
Okay, well, I also would push back on the marks of intentionality, but I mean, like what I'm talking about here is not just the timing anomaly, because that's one dimension where there's fit, right? There's also basically these other dimensions where we have a fit. So like another is the location, right? So the cova. So let's say what I posit is a localized emitter that's within 3 kilometers of the cova, right? Then another dimension of specificity of the fulfillment is how localized it was to the area where the miracle was supposed to happen. So like if it was something that happened for all of Portugal or happened for all of Europe or something, right? That's like degrading the specificity of the fulfillment. But the more tailored it is to the area, the higher the specificity. Or like, if the drawing, like if the light beams seem to be like a spotlight that's specifically pointing at the cova, and like we have a diffuser that forms over the cova in tandem to make the visibility more whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess, again, part of my favorite explanation is that there's some phenomenon, admittedly not well understood, but like there's some phenomenon where people see this because they're standing there looking for it. And then it's kind of not surprising that it happened,
Well, no. So I think we're
at
conflating
that place.
two separate questions. So one is, can we exclude sun gazing as an explanation? That's one question. And like that question, once we adjudicate that, then I take us to proceed to the question, whatever we say did happen could it be a coincidence?
I do agree that if you can establish that there was really like an objective light source, I mean, I guess there are weird, they're like sun, like that there was a light source that like doesn't have any natural precedent, isn't similar to any natural phenomenon, etc. Then it does seem like you would have a pretty good argument for, yeah, like something supernatural or paranormal happened. Which again was what I thought when I first read the article. So it's not impossible for me to come to that conclusion.
Well, then maybe we should also talk about the interpretational question, which is, let's suppose we have in the background authenticity of the miracle. And then think about what the implications of that are, which is, okay, so there's one question, which is like, if you accept authenticity, are you saying God did it, or are you saying a demon did it?
Or, well, I mean, I don't know. I would guess probably not demon, but I assume that if it was demon, it has this.
Oh, sorry, you're kind of cutting out a bit.
Oh, sorry, it's heavyweight. I don't know. I wouldn't. Because,
Yeah, wait, Dustin, we can't really hear you.
oh, sorry. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
I wouldn't attribute it to a demon because I would assume that like a demon's message would be worse, I would assume that a demon is not just trying to get you to like be Catholic, but is
Yeah,
I'm
like
not
you don't think they're
Catholic,
that
but
bad.
yeah, I'm not Catholic, but I don't think it's like that bad as compared to other things you could be. So I would guess probably not a demon. It could be God. It could be, I don't know, some paranormal force. It could be some other spiritual force.
Well, no, I'm saying, so let's say, like, where are you at credence-wise for the agent that's the author of the miracle, assuming authenticity?
Oh, yeah. I mean, let's suppose it's God.
Okay, then we say,
Yeah.
does God perform deceptive miracles? Like that becomes a question. Is God a deceiver?
No, I don't think God's a deceiver.
So then, if God affirms Catholicism explicitly or implicitly in the Fatima message, does that not basically contextualize the miracle as a vindication of Catholicism that we just should take at face value?
Yeah, I agree with that to some extent. I guess the issue here is going to be, I mean, and I think this is true of you as well. I'm like enough of a pluralist to be pretty open to thinking miracles occur in different traditions. So like, it's not enough just to think that a miracle occurred, in a Catholic religious context. Got to be something more. Okay. Right. I guess I don't. That seems fine to me.
Okay, well, so then we can start.
Right.
Well, let me start.
The Russia stuff again. The Russia stuff I don't think was present in the beginning.
Well,
Right.
so
At least I don't think I have a good reason to believe
once
that.
we have, I think the debate changes when we have authenticity in the background. But so here's a few things that I think we should point out. So one of the ones that I think is actually one of the more direct arguments that it's a vindication of Catholicism is the immediate context before Lucia makes the request for a miracle to be performed in July, which is what Lucia asked is, will you convert this person? Will you convert this person? How about this person? And the Virgin Mary is granting the petitions to convert people, right, to Catholicism. So it's already implying that Catholicism is the proper object of conversion.
From what?
Huh? from
Convert
either
them from what?
like lukewarmism or from like being an atheist.
Yeah. Well, I
So,
mean,
like,
I think it's probably usually positive for being an atheist to being Catholic. I mean, it makes sense, but
I mean, I think to say that the Virgin Mary is the agent that is directly causing people to enter into a religion that like falsely says you're going to hell unless you believe all this false doctrine.
oh yeah, yeah, it is true that I mean the health stuff in the Revelations, I have, but
No. And
I mean,
besides that, I'm not even going there yet. But like what I meant
yeah,
was to send people into the Catholic Church, even though the Catholic Church's position is you can't be a member, on pain of hell unless you accept, you assent to everything we believe.
oh yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, presumably like Zaytun caused people to convert to
Yeah, but the
denominations that.
distinction with Zaytun is that Zaytun didn't have any private revelation that accompanied it, that it was vindicating. Where, for instance, Mary said, "I'm going to convert people to Coptic Orthodoxy."
Yeah, but I mean, she must have known it would be an effect. Like she could have appeared at a Catholic church.
No, I mean you can see a foreseeable effect that's going to be some people being misled. I mean, obviously, I think her concern there is more with the people in the immediate context, um, in Egypt with the Muslims and the Copts and whatever, while maintaining the not too conspicuous thing, like triggering
Yeah.
mass conversion of Egypt from Coptic Orthodoxy to Catholicism. I think that might violate some of the constraints of my hiddenness theory. But regardless, I think like with the Copts, it's not surprising to me that they have lesser miracles than we do because they're like a sister church with saints and valid sacraments and stuff like that. So I assume Mary's going to do some nice stuff for them that's kind of qualitatively worse than our stuff. But the main thing I'm concerned with in this case is, so now the Virgin Mary is saying she will convert people to Catholicism. Then Lucia, immediately after giving those petitions, says, "Perform a miracle so that all may believe." And then basically the Virgin Mary says, "In October, I'll make everyone believe." So that contextualizes the miracle itself as the conversion fulfillment promise. It's a vindication of Catholicism in the way that her petitions to convert people to Catholicism were, oriented towards conversion to Catholicism as the true church.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I guess that let that car pass. I guess I basically think that like all of the large churches, denominations, whatever, have had like some important false doctrines, some immoral doctrines, have had all sorts of bad things about them. And so if God is going to convert, if God is going to use like these things at all, if God is going to work through them at all, uh, inevitably it's going to involve people converting to them and thereby coming to believe some false things and whatever. And like the intention is not to make them believe the false things. And presumably God is not going to say like, by the way, X or X is false. But I guess just I mean, like you were saying with your theory about why the attempts to consecrate Russia have not worked. These are all kind of going to be flawed human institutions to some extent.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the question becomes,
I'm not that bothered if in a certain context, getting people to convert to Catholicism is the right move.
well, I mean, my main thing here is if you're going to make the most obvious and colossal miracle of all time uh, be framed explicitly by you in your discursive back and forth with the main person about
Yeah.
Catholicism, that seems like okay, first at the very least very unfitting given other religious beliefs are true, but second, like probably either an explicit lie or a lie by implication, to where it basically is a deception. But I mean, I guess we can also just keep contextualizing it further with the other content. So let's go now to the secrets, even though there's other stuff incidentally that I could mention. For the secrets, it's bizarre to me to think that the secrets did exist in 1917. The vindicatory miracle happened, and then the agent of the miracle was indifferent as to whether the secrets were divulged.
Well, I don't think I mean, yes, presumably, if the text of the secrets was given to Lucia by Mary, then that's like a good argument for the content and implications of the secrets being correct. I agree with that.
Well, no, and what I'm saying is that if secrets at all were given to Lucia in connection with these apparitions, then it would be kind of bizarre if the person who gave her secrets then allowed her to distort and mangle the secrets beyond recognition in later years.
Oh, well, I don't know. I mean, she allowed her to mangle the thing about the war ending. She allowed her to mangle whether John Paul had fulfilled the requests. She allowed the popes to mangle whether they fulfilled the requests. Presumably with the consequence that
Well, I
like
mean,
millions and
I don't
millions
even
of
think
people died.
I don't think all those details are accurate exactly. But the thing about the war will end, basically, I think the Virgin succeeded in preserving the conditional prophecy, but also allowed there to be additional ambiguity.
Well, Lucia got the message wrong.
No, but my point is that what I think that the Virgin is going to do is preserve the message, not preserve the messenger from error. So the thing that the Virgin wants is for the message to be there to be able to be discerned.
Maybe.
But like it just seems to
maybe
me
not.
that like everybody at the time the apparitions were happening knew there were secrets and that they were of central importance to these apparitions, which is why everybody was desperate to induce the kids to tell them the secrets. And then Lucia basically behaves in a way over the next interval of time that's perfectly consistent with basically she was given these prophetic secrets, you know.
I mean, it doesn't. So Mary in 1917, Mary tells Lucia that World War II is going to happen unless the Pope consecrates Russia. And she's not allowed to tell anybody that. She's not even allowed to tell anybody about consecrating Russia. And then, what, in the 20s, she tells her to start telling people about consecrating Russia. And then in the 30s, Lucia is allowed to tell a couple people about World War. But then we don't actually find out about the World War II stuff until after the war has started. I mean, you know, the specific details that are given in the prophecy about timing, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, you know, all that
Like,
matters at this point is just that the prophecy existed prior to its being divulged.
Yeah, well, I just, insofar as we're speculating about divine psychology, like it would have been useful to know earlier that World War II is going to happen unless the Pope does this exactly right. It feels like a weird series of events.
The whole framing around this thing. So basically, the whole point of the apparitions is contextualized in the second secret as being about establishing in the world devotion to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. So that's the purpose of Our Lady of Fatima. That's the mission statement of Our Lady of Fatima. And that idea of it being about worldwide devotion to the Immaculate Heart, that's a core, integral part of the message that I wouldn't expect the author of the miracle to allow to then be like distorted or lost in transmission.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There have been a bunch of things I've said where you've said correctly, like, oh, divine psychology is tricky, blah, 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 blah. I don't know. I mean, it seems hard, you know, I think maybe you don't think this, but like, I think the Bible has all these mistakes in it. Those prophets made mistakes. I think the Catholic Church made all sorts of mistakes. Like, Lucia made some mistakes. And I don't have high confidence that like, oh, she wouldn't allow this to be a later embellishment or something.
I mean, I just think there needs
When
to
to
be some
me that's
kind
sort of
I think there needs to be some kind of proportion between the miracle and the message. And that's what I mean.
yeah.
So like if the miracle is going to be of the gargantuan scale that it was, which is anomalous for miracles,
Yeah.
So if it's going to be that, then at a bare minimum, the thing I expect to happen is like in vague outline the mission statement of the miracle.
Yeah. Well, but we didn't even get that at the time, right?
Well, what we
What
got,
everybody thought that was the point was they need to pray the rosary and stuff.
right, and that clearly is also an element of the miracle. Basically, there's a threefold message of
By
Fatima.
the way, I'm going to need to go in a minute because I
Yeah,
have
no problem.
dinner plans with my fiance, who I love. But
Yeah, no problem. But yeah, I mean, I view it as the obviously at the minimum, we need Lucia to be making huge errors in memory, and it's hard to explain also the later apparitions, like the follow-up apparitions, because it's like after she was the seer in this massive miracle, like she became a delusional schizophrenic, she, I don't know, was demon possessed. What happened with the follow-up apparitions where they give you the first Saturday's devotion and all that stuff, where we just have like near contemporaneous with that apparition. So yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to discard Fatima 2 if you accept the authenticity of Fatima 1. I think for me that seems like a hard, like I mean, even just the idea of whatever you have to say to skeptically explain the later apparitions to Lucia.
I take that point. You have some question about what's going on with the later apparitions, where at least prima facie it would be surprising if the original apparitions were vertical and the later ones were something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, the last thing I would just say is like, at the very least, if I can establish a pattern that all the miracles with evidence this good are Catholic miracles, if I get a few data points out on the table for that to support that hypothesis, then I think it becomes like very hard to resist converting to Catholicism if it's uniquely privileged by the miracle record.
Yeah, that seems right to some extent. I mean, you have to control for the fact that like a third of the world is Catholic, and Catholics are very miracle interested, and
Yeah,
so
but I feel like
it wouldn't be
examples.
surprising if there was some selection bias in favor of Catholicism.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the examples I would cite though would be the cases where, like, take the miracle of the sun. It's basically like the reason why that's like a notorious, well-evidenced miracle is because of the nature of the event. Like, it couldn't be due to your investigative incapacity that like something of that gargantuan scale could be happening for Protestants or Muslims or any other
Yeah.
denomination. That something of
Oh
that.
yeah. That couldn't be due to investigative incapacity, but it could be due to this is a social context where people are inclined to have visions, and then lots of people believe them, and they go out and stand around and look up at the sun. But
Oh no.
like,
So I agree with you. I'm not making that. I'm only making that argument with authenticity in the background, right? Which is saying we're trying to make the inference from authenticity to Catholicism, and I'm basically saying if God is doing miracles, where basically it seems like He's doing all the work to verify them intentionally, He's like performing them in such a way that they're just like gigantically noticeable and conspicuous,
Yeah.
Then it seems hard to explain that by sampling.
Yeah, and I mean, what are the plausible candidates there? Zaytun, which is not specifically Catholic. This one, which is specifically Catholic.
Oh, I mean,
What
I could
what?
go through the other miracles if you want. So, like another example, I mean, you've heard of Lourdes
Yeah.
in
Well, I
Guadalupe.
mean, is that? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Is Lourdes like? I mean, Lourdes is just a bunch of healing miracles. Like those do exist in lots of traditions, and I mean, there is an
No, but I'm talking about the
invested in.
original apparitions to Saint Bernadette.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, I don't know much about those.
And then the obviously you have the Eucharistic miracles, which seem to be fine-tuned for scientific verification. And then so like it seems like the reason they're being performed is so that they can then be authenticated scientifically, and like the details of the miracle are being optimized for verification. Then you have like things like, you know, stigmatics like Padre Pio, and just all the supernatural charisms that he has, and how it seems like God is performing them in such a way that they can be like corroborated and validated by massive independent evidence. And so and you can keep going through, like Our Lady of Good Event, and you can go through a bunch of these things where, if we went to, I mean, like it seems like also we kind of have a monopoly on miracles with physical evidence, but like I'm having trouble thinking of a rival sect with a miracle that has good physical traces.
Well, I mean, some of the healing miracles, you have medical records and whatever.
No, but those aren't vindicatory.
Oh, but yeah.
Like what
Well, I
what
mean,
I'm specifically looking for is not paranormal or supernatural, but like in connection with revelation that distinguishes between sects.
yeah. Yeah, I wonder if that's true. I mean, if you had a bunch of records of Pentecostals or whatever, are there not going to be cases where the preacher says, something about converting people to Pentecostalism and then someone's healed, or, I mean, I don't know.
Well, no, but
But
I'm just saying the bare context of person is healed here, and this is what was happening while they were healed.
yeah.
That's like way weaker than what I'm talking about in terms of like the vindicatory intent being manifest from the nature of the act itself. Where it's
Oh,
like because I can give you good examples of healing miracles for Jews and Muslims and Hindus, So if it was just bare
yeah.
context of occurrence, we just know healing miracles are so ubiquitous, and they just by their nature don't communicate anything about the
Oh,
divine
yeah.
intent to vindicate.
But I guess, I mean, there are, I assume, maybe not, but I assume that, you were saying, well, she asked Mary for a sign to convert people to Catholicism. I would guess there's probably at least one case of like a pretty plausible healing miracle where, the preacher says something like, uh, you please show people your power so that they'll know that such and such is true or whatever, and then somebody gets healed. Maybe not, or maybe you want to say that's different because, allegedly Mary explicitly agreed and it's like a more impressive miracle or whatever.
Well,
But
just the thing I want is from the sign that God performs, for it to be God communicating like clearly and unambiguously something that is affirming distinctives of your set as things that set your sect apart from mine. So like for instance, like faith alone, so like that's what I'm looking for, is like the sign itself is conveying an endorsement of something that you hold that I reject.
right. Um, yeah. Whereas, I mean, I guess, I sort of don't really expect to have that because I think like God is probably not that bothered about uh, fine-grained delineations between sects and whatever, and God probably doesn't do that many
No, but I'm
miracles
just
and
saying
blah
it's
blah
weird if I
blah.
have a bunch of them and you have none.
Oh, well, I mean, insofar as they're real, yes. I think it's
Right,
not weird
exactly.
that
That's,
they're,
but that's what
yeah.
I'm talking about. Is that when
Yeah.
I start,
Of course, I don't. I mean, a lot of the things you said, I don't grant that they're authentic miracles.
yeah,
But
but I just think there's
that would
overwhelming
be a
evidence.
separate. Yeah,
And
that
like
would be a separate.
once you start conceding a few, I think we're gonna also start. It's gonna start getting easier for me to prove each successive one.
Uh, yeah, that would be right. Um, but anyway, I should, as I successfully predicted, I do need to go.
Okay, good talking
uh,
with you.
so I can have dinner with my fiance. But I'm glad that we've conclusively settled this issue. Um, and yeah, good talking with you.